Welcome back to Shop Talk. In a previous video, I'd mentioned that I plan to do some hot tent camping this winter. So step one in making a hot tent is a hot stove. So I started doing some research on stove options, and I found that the most popular option is a titanium stove. And they're starting at around $350, which is quite the barrier to entry to getting started, and it's something that I'm not even convinced I'm gonna like, but definitely want to try. So I seen another video, and I'll post the link in the description of a guy on YouTube that made a hot tent stove out of a paint can, a metal paint can. So I kind of looked at his design. He didn't do a video on how he made that particular stove. So I'm going to attempt to make one from scratch, and I'm going to take you along with all of the steps that I took in creating the stove. Then also in the description, I'll put all the parts that I used as well. So let's get started. So as far as parts go, here's what we have. Obviously, we have the paint can. I got this particular metal paint can. It was just empty. They sell them empty at Home Depot. Just a metal paint can. I have an end cap for some home HVAC ducting. I have 4 bolts that will be used as the legs. Each bolt has 2 wing nuts, and it's got a hex end on it, and then an additional bolt on each one of those nuts. We have 2 small hinges. We have a latch that I plan to use on the door to open and close the door. Hopefully this will stay cool. And we have the elbow pipe for the back of the stove. This particular elbow pipe, you can rotate it and twist it to make different shapes. So I'm assuming based on my setups, I may need strange angles to get the pipe out through the stove jack on the tent. And then I plan to put it all together with some short rivets instead of screws. You could use bolts just as easily, but I think rivets are going to look a little cleaner. So that's parts. So let's get to building this thing. So my first step in this process was to take the lid of the paint can and use my quick square here, and I used this to create the straight lines to box in what will be cut out for the door. So when it's finished, box it in however you feel work best for you. That's how I did it. Then I took this end cap piece, and I laid a ruler in it, and I traced it around the outside, and I'll cut out the center piece so it won't be needed, and we'll use the center piece for the door and some additional scrap sheet metal that will be needed for the rest of the project. And then this will be the base of the stove, and the legs will bolt into this. This will give us like a snow platform, or a platform that's going to be more stable on uneven surface. And then we have more cutting to do. I traced the tapered end of this elbow onto a piece of paper. I then laid the piece of paper on here and traced out a circle. And we'll be cutting all of these parts out with my Dremel tool. So let's get all of that cut out, and we'll go on to the next steps. So for cutting this out, you could either drill holes in these corners and use a metal cutting blade and a jigsaw, or use a Dremel tool if you have one. I happen to have one, so I'm going to use that. Let's get this cut out. So to speed the process up, what I actually did was just cut some slits with my Dremel tool. I'm actually going to use my jigsaw with a metal cutting blade in it to finish cutting this out. Dremel can do it, but it just doesn't quite have the oomph to get it done in a timely manner. So now let's grab a file and let's get all of these parts we just cut out, let's get them cleaned up. Actually, first let's test fit our stove. So that fits pretty good. I'm not super happy with how far into the stove it goes, so we'll see if we're going to need to shorten that tapered end up a bit. I'm thinking we're going to need to shorten that up. But it's starting to look like a stove now, isn't it? Let's do 3.5 by 4 inches tall. That way if we have to make this opening taller, we'll have a little extra coverage and we won't have to redo the door. So 3.5 by 4 inches. So there's our door. I'm gonna roll. I'm actually gonna round these corners off quick. That should work nicely. Let's place our hinges here and see if we have enough room for those. I think we might be stuck just doing the one hinge. So one problem I'm seeing here, actually maybe that won't be it. So I think I'm also going to cut a spacer to place right here behind the hinges. That way I think there's less of a chance of the door trying to bind when it shuts and trying to stick open. So I'm going to go ahead and get that spacer cut. I'll probably just tape it in place, then we'll drill holes here. Okay, so I got our little spacers cut that are actually going to tuck behind the hinge here so that the hinges are attached to the same plane as the door essentially. So let's tape these in place and we'll drill our holes for the rivets. I'm using a 9/64 drill bit to see if I think this is the correct size. Okay, so I'm thinking we'll rivet the hinges to the stove first, and then we'll rivet the hinges to the door. Okay, we have two hinges attached that are okay, actually it's the spacers that are throwing me off that look crooked, but the hinges look pretty straight. So we might be good there. Let's flip those hinges over. Drop the door in place. Alrighty. We now have the front of our stove with the door open thing. I'm hoping that this, given that it's not quite attached solidly to the door, it should stay cool. And we have our door. So I'm trying to figure out, we're going to attach the legs next to the bottom of the stove. I'm trying to figure out a way to do this now. I created a stencil that I can put onto the bottom of the stove, and then I can lay this into the footprint of the stove so that I can see where to drill the holes for the legs in the actual stove stand as well. I'm going to line the center of this up with the, actually that's probably not, yeah, that is pretty well centered. Tape it to the stove here. I'll make my marks for the legs. We're gonna have to drill 1/4 inch holes in this for the legs, but given that this is pretty thin metal, we're gonna start out with a 9/60. What is that? I'm gonna start out with an 1/8 inch drill bit, and then we're gonna step it up to a 1/4 inch. That way we don't have to push so hard with a bigger drill bit and dent this thing like crazy. Okay, so let's try to get an idea here of where we're gonna put these legs. So the legs are gonna come up through the base. So the plan is to drill a hole into the bottom of this, and then we'll run the bolt through till the bottom's out on the hex head, and then I'll run this nut down to the other side so that the leg can't push through, and then this would run up to the stove. But I gotta first get the holes in the stove portion to figure out our spacing front to back for these actual bolts. So that's the plan. And I have the paper attached here, so let's kind of figure out I guess it doesn't really matter because the angle of the legs would compensate. Yeah. All right. that's the idea. That'll run up to the stove. Let's drill the holes in the stove next. All right, let's test fit these legs. It's going to take a little time in the field to get set up, and one thing I'm noticing right away is that if this is for hot pit camping, a lot of this is requiring a lot of dexterity. You can see it. I'm going to have to thread screws and whatnot, or thread nuts, which if my hands are extremely cold, it could be not fun or not doable. So this stove is definitely not, I'm not doing this DIY to say, hey, here's a stove that's field tested and will guarantee to keep you alive in the wild. It's not the goal here. We're having fun and we're experimenting. This stove will still have to be field tested before I take this out and actually rely upon it to keep me warm at night or during the day. So I'm not actually sure if I'm gonna run my stove at night in my hot tent or get a sleeping bag that's just rated to the temperature. There's some inherent risk with just running a stove at night while you're sleeping. One being carbon monoxide, so I'll definitely have a carbon monoxide detector with me. Battery powered one in my tent. The reason I'm not using a wing nut down here is just because the wing nut wouldn't be able to screw down and get as close to the edges like this can. Alright, so now we put our wing nuts on upside down. Yeah, we have a problem. Those do not match up whatsoever. Those holes are going to have to be much narrower. Yeah, so there you can see I probably should have put these in here first. Place this next to the stove and then drilled my holes. That's not the end of the world. I mean, those might just help with the draft, the stove drafting. I may capitalize on this mistake and create something that I can plug these holes with and remove them. And yeah, what maybe I'll do is I'll have like a little bolt that I can put in plug these holes with, and I can remove them one at a time to increase the draft of the stove. So that will actually, hopefully, allow me to not have to put any draft control on the actual door itself. So let me drill new holes and then I'll be right back. All right, so there we have it. You want to put your holes 3 inches apart on the bottom of the stove is what you want. If you use the same size HVAC cap that I did. And then all we do is we grab our additional wing nuts. We tighten these down. Actually run these ones up a little bit. So let me get all of these in and I'll be right back. We'll see how stable this is. All right, so we're back. It's actually really stable. I'm really happy with that. I like the height that it is off the ground. That's good. Didn't want it to be real close to the ground. Pop the chimney in. I pop the door on. So one thing with the door is that after you take this front part off to attach the nuts. So I'm gonna have to test trying to attach the nuts without taking this off. Might be able to work my way in through there. It's probably doable without taking the front off. Just have to be careful not to cut yourself reaching into there. So that's basically done. There's a couple of things we still need to do. We'll need to get some chicken. I think I'm going to put some chicken wire down here just to keep the wood off the bottom of the stove and give a spot for the ashes to accumulate. And then I want to put at the very top of the stove, I want to place a plate up here that kind of lays flat. So if you're looking at the side of the stove, there'll be a flat plate inside of the stove like this. And what I'm hoping to do is put that tight against the back of the stove and leave a gap in the front of the stove, like maybe like that. And the idea that I'm hoping happens here is that it's gonna cause the flames to take a longer route through the stove up through the chimney, and we'll get better combustion because we'll have like a really hot pocket here where the gases should hopefully continue to burn, and we'll have more heat being dumped into the stove itself and hopefully into the tent. So I'm gonna work on that next here. But if you decide you don't want to go that step, you'd basically have a functioning stove at this point. You just need to put something in the bottom to keep the wood off of the bottom of the stove. I would think you would want that. Okay, so what I've done here is I created a plate, bent one end. I was gonna bend both ends, but I'm thinking that the interior of this is just too small to be plugging it to that extent. So we'll have a gap. We'll have a gap along this side, have a gap along the back, and obviously along the front. So I have the holes drilled, so let's get the rivets in place and put this in there and we'll see what it looks like here. So here we have it. You can see the rivets on the outside of the stove now. You can actually see the plate in the stove. I'm not sure if this is brilliant or idiotic at the moment. So I'm trying to increase the path the flames have to take through the stove without completely getting smoked out in the tent. And I also would like to have a small spot to boil water here, so I want the flames to kind of be licking the stove up top. Hopefully is the plan. I'm hoping I can also boil water with this, which is a bit of a long shot. I think the stove might be a little small for that, but we'll find out. So let's get this in place, and we're definitely going to have to shorten up. Definitely have to shorten up this elbow, I think, by a lot. Yeah, because I don't know. Maybe it could just rest like that. I just have to be careful that it doesn't come all the way down and plug up. I'll definitely shorten it when I get a moment. So there we have it. I went ahead and trimmed off the excess on that. We should have plenty of clearance. And hopefully by installing this plate, I accomplish my goals and I don't just manage to completely destroy the draft of the stove. So I will go get some chicken wire and I'll get that installed in the meantime. And next video I'll post, we will be testing the stove. Alrighty, it's a little darker in the shop right now. So as you can tell, got a mess on my workbench. It's mission complete. The stove is basically done. You just need to put a little bit of chicken wire at the bottom to keep the wood off the bottom of the stove and allow a place for the coals and the ash to accumulate. So the next step is to field test this. The next video posted after this will be me testing this in the backyard to see how well it holds a flame. And if it holds a flame and if it pulls a draft, if I can get it to hold a flame, we'll be testing how long this can run without adding more fuel to it. I have a feeling that if this does work, that I'll be up all night long feeding this. So this is by no means a proven stove. So if you build one of these, I can't guarantee that this will that this exact design will do everything you need. You'll have to stay tuned for the conclusion of the field testing of this. That's it for the stove build. I really hope you enjoyed watching this. It's pretty easy to build. It's not bad at all. If you happen to build this and you make some changes to it and you find ways to improve it, please let me know what you've changed. I'd love to see different renditions of this particular stove. It's just a really neat idea. I hope it works like I'm hoping it does. So stay tuned for the next video, and we'll be doing some field testing of this particular stove. Catch you later.